All right, guys, welcome to our lesson. This one is going to be so much fun. I'm going to be teaching you guys how to use watercolor paints to paint an ocean landscape, one of my absolute favorite things to paint. We're going to do this on a smaller scale in our sketchbook, not anything too big, not too much detail. We're going to keep it pretty simple, but I want to show you guys how to use the colors and use blending to really get that ocean landscape sunset type scene. It's going to be so much fun. So the first thing we're going to do is find a clean page in our sketchbook, and instead of painting directly on top of your sketchbook, you're going to pull that page open so that it's laying flat on the table, and the rest of your sketchbook will be to the side of it. And then we're going to use some tape, and I like to use blue painter's tape to secure that other side, the right hand side of your paper, onto the table. And the reason I like to do that is because when you use watercolor paint on the entire sheet of paper and the whole paper gets wet, it likes to curl. And so we want to secure that paper down, so the tape is going to keep it nice and flat on the table, while the binding of your sketchbook will keep the other side of your paper nice and flat. So this is a great way to keep the paper flat while you're painting, but not have to rip it out of your sketchbook if you don't want to. And we are going to start with a pencil. I want to start sketching out just the general idea of this painting. So the first thing I'm going to do right across the middle of that paper is I'm going to draw a line, and this is our horizon line. The horizon line in a landscape is where the sun sets and rises, right? It's where the land meets the sky. So we're going to draw a straight line across just to show where that halfway point is in our paper. Then, to the right side of my paper, I want to draw just a little shape that hints at land coming off of the ocean. So this is going to be way out in the distance. It just looks like a little triangle shape. It doesn't have to be perfect. I like to make it a little jagged or wavy, just to give it more of a rock type look to it. And then I'm going to go down towards the ocean side of my paper where the water is going to be. And I like to draw rocks sort of sitting in the water. So the way to do that would be to draw a shape of a rock on top, and then the bottom of that shape is going to be flat because it's going into the water. So the water makes that bottom line very flat. So you can see I'm just drawing different sizes and shapes of rocks in the water down here. And it's just giving me a general idea of where they're going to be. It may change slightly while I'm doing my painting, but this is just giving me an idea of where I want these rocks to live. So try to copy these shapes in your paper. You can pause the video just to get an idea of what these shapes might look like. It does not have to be perfect at all. And again, that bottom part of the rock is going to be very flat so that we can get that feel that it's going into the water and look three-dimensional. Okay, that's it. That's all I'm going to draw with the pencil. I'm going to move on to my paints. And I'm going to start with a larger brush just to get the sky done. I want to use a lot of water on my sky and a lot of paint. So we're going to use a bigger brush, and I'm going to start with the color purple. So if you could find purple somewhere in your paint palette, that's going to be the color we start with. And we're going to start on the right hand side of our paper with that purple. It's going to be the darkest part of our sky. And we're just going to dab it on. I have water and paint, so you can see that the water is pooling up nicely. It's giving it a nice texture, and I'm just dabbing that paint onto the paper. Next, I'm going to use a red. So now I've gotten water and red paint on my paintbrush, and I'm going to do the same thing, and I'm just layering it out. So now I'm using that paint, letting it blend into the purple a little bit, using the water, letting it do its thing, not trying to over control it. You can see that I'm not doing a straight line across. It's very jagged, very bumpy, and then I'm taking water every once in a while to smooth it out and blend it out into the sky. Now I'm going to move on to the color orange, and it's going to go right next to that red. Again, do not make a straight line. We're not painting a rainbow. We are making it nice and fluffy, nice and soft. They're blending together. Let the water do what it does and allow those colors to blend together. And then every once in a while, I'm going to use that water to just blend those colors together. Just dab it on there. I'm not pushing very hard at all on my paper. I'm just letting the water and the paint do what it wants to do. Blend out those edges. Every time you finish a color, you want to blend out those edges. Make sure that they're nice and transparent so that you can then put that next color on there and they'll blend together nicely. I'm going to move now to more of a yellow color and do the same exact thing. And you're going to see that these are getting bigger because they're getting further down towards the water and they're getting bigger. Most of your sky is going to be orange and yellow. So that's why this yellow section is so much bigger than the purple and the red. You're going to take these colors right down to that horizon line. We're going to make sure that these match up right at that horizon line. And now I'm going to go back with that water and just make sure that I'm blending it out and filling the rest of the sky with this yellow color. And then I'm just going to go back with some water here and there. If there's maybe like a glob of paint or some spot that has too much water, just sort of spreading those out nice and gently, not trying to over control it too much, just to sort of blend those together. Now I'm going to go back because the purple has dried quite a bit by now, and I want to make that purple just a little bit darker, so I'm going to add one more coat of purple on top of it. Again, we want that to be the darkest part of our sky. I'm going to sort of blend in that red a little bit so that it's nice and dark. I don't want any seams or anything like that. I want it to all just really blend in nicely together. So do what's best for your painting. Again, your paint's going to do different things and you'll want it to look the way you want it to look. So don't feel like you have to do exactly what I'm doing, but just watch and see how I'm layering these colors on top of each other to get that nice blended sunset look. Okay, so now I'm going to move on to the ocean. I'm going to just grab the darkest blue I have in my paint palette, and I'm going to make sure I have enough water on my brush so the paint goes onto the paper nice and smooth. But I'm going to make this blue fairly dark because it's going to be the bottom of my paper, which is where the darkest part of the ocean will be in my picture. So I'm going to start mixing that in my palette, make sure it's nice and wet, and then I'm going to go to the bottom of my paper and just start putting in the water. And you're going to notice that I'm doing this in a much different brush stroke. I'm not dabbing it on, I'm not fluffing it up. It is nice streaks back and forth, making sure I have water. You can tell as soon as your paintbrush runs out of water when it gets a little bit fuzzy. So you want to make sure that it's nice and wet. Keep going over it. You don't want lines necessarily in your painting, so make sure you're going over it with water to blend those together. But you do want that paint to be going in a left, right motion horizontally across your paper. That's really going to give this the illusion that we're looking at water and not a sky. So That is a very important tip for this painting, is to do the water in a back and forth motion. I like using a square tipped brush for this type of painting because it does give that nice clean back and forth stripe look to the water. So if you do have a brush that's square like mine, use it. If all you have is a pointed brush, that's totally fine as well. Just make sure you're using these same brush strokes back and forth. You're going to see that that blue is starting to fade out the higher that I get up into the water. By the time I hit the horizon, it's going to be almost white. So you're really going to be gradually lightening the ocean as you get closer to the horizon line. So you'll see as I'm getting closer to the horizon, I'm laying just a little bit of paint with a lot of water, going over it with water, lightening it up, blending it in, because I really want that ocean to fade out. And now I'm going to go back to my horizon line and make sure that that line is nice and crisp against the ocean. I'm just going to use that same yellow color that I was using and really clean it up so that those two match up nice and neat. I'm going to go back to the bottom of my ocean now and do my second layer of paint just to really darken it up and make it look nice and rich at the bottom. It's going to look like a deep ocean down there. When you're doing this, make sure you're not pushing too hard on your paper, because what can happen is your paper will get too wet and it will start to ball up. You'll see little pieces of the paper coming off and it'll start to wear off the paper. So make sure you're being very gentle with it when you're doing this and not pushing too hard on your paper. And again, I'm just really trying to achieve that darker to lighter all the way up, that gradient all the way to the top. So make sure that you are thinking about that as you're adding your color. Don't add any super dark streaks of blue at the top of your ocean, because it's very hard to take that paint off once it's on there. So start at the bottom and then gradually work your way up. So now I'm taking water and just the slightest amount of blue paint on my paintbrush up at that horizon line. And then I want to add just a tad of yellow. We want to make it look like that yellow is kind of reflecting off of the ocean. And it may just come right off of that horizon line. You may be able to blend it right into the ocean, which is what I'm doing here. You can see that that water is sort of taking that paint down onto the ocean, which is totally fine because I want the ocean to be reflecting just the slightest hint of that sunset. So that yellow bleeding down, if I can just take it left to right in that same style as the rest of the ocean, it's going to give it that illusion. All right. Now that I've finished the entire paper, I need it to dry. So this is going to take probably about 10-15 minutes, or come back to it a different day if you want. But we want this to dry completely. So make sure that you're letting it dry. We don't want any wet paint left on your paper when you go back to add the details. So go ahead and let this dry and then come back to it in a little bit or tomorrow or whenever you want to continue the painting. But just please make sure that it's dry. Okay, so my picture is almost completely dry, and I'm going to go back in and start adding my details. So to do this, you're going to pick up a pointed brush. The smaller the better, because we're going to be doing some pretty teeny little rocks in here with our brush. So I do have my pointed brush. This is my favorite one. And I'm going to be using right now a mix of brown and black. So make a little mixture on your palette somewhere of brown and black, mostly black. We want it to be very dark because the land out in the distance is going to be a very dark, dark, dark color. So now I'm just going to gently fill it in. There's no detail to this. I'm literally just filling this shape in with black. So nice and easy. Remember that bottom part of that rock needs to be flat. So make sure you're going nice and slow and make sure that you get that nice flush line at the bottom. So now I'm going to go ahead and move down to my other rocks in the ocean. And for these ones, I'm going to start with a brown color. I'm going to start lighter and then go in darker after, because it's much easier to work up to a darker black color than to use black and try and lighten it up later. So I want some of this brown to show through so I can show sun shining on these rocks. So I'm going to start with a brown and quite a bit of water, not too much that it's going to go everywhere on your paper, but enough that you can really spread that paint. And you're going to see I'm going to start with one of my bigger rocks, and the paint is fairly light. You can see right through it to the ocean, and that's great. We want to layer these colors together, so it's a very light brown right now. Then I'm going to go back and I'm going to use black on the bottom part of the rock. And the reason I'm doing this is because the shadow of the rock is at the bottom, and the top of the rock has a highlight. So we want that black to meet up with the brown and create that difference in lighting on the rock to make it look realistic and three-dimensional. So I'm using the same technique where I have the flat part of the bottom of the rock in black, and then I'm going to fill in that bottom part with the black to create that shadow. Once I've done that, I'm just going to get water and blend them together, just like we did with the sky. I just want to blend those two colors together nice and easy, not going outside the lines, keeping it nice and clean. And I just want to create the illusion that there is a shadow at the bottom of the rock, and then that upper part is the highlight. And you can see already how it looks three-dimensional just by doing what we just did. So light brown on the top, black on the bottom, and then use water and a small brush just to blend them together gently. Now I'm going to go to the bottom again with some more black, and I really want to make the bottom of this rock solid black, as dark as you can make it, nice and delicate, just at the bottom. Okay, I'm going to go back to my brown. I'm going to do the small rock that's next to it, same exact way. Fill it in with the brown first on the top, and then go back to the bottom and add in your black. Once you've added the black, you're going to go back and just get your water and blend those two together. So that's a nice soft transition between the two colors. So I'm just going to continue this technique with all of the rocks on my paper. So I'm going to go ahead and let you guys do the same. If you need to pause this at any time, please do. Rewind it as much as you need to, and go ahead and start painting your rocks in your ocean. Okay, now that you've finished all of your rocks, we're going to go ahead and start the shadows on the ocean. And I'm using a blue mixed with a little bit of black, but it's very light. And just along the bottom of that land, that rock out in the distance, I'm just going to create a little bit of a shadow underneath it. Just draw a line with the paint and then use water to let it blend right into the ocean. And you'll see how it creates the illusion of a shadow right on the water cast by that rock. We're not using a whole lot of paint for these. We want them to be very subtle. Okay, so now I'm going to move down to these other rocks and do the exact same thing. I'm following that bottom line of the rock and I'm just creating a blue shadow underneath. Once I have the shadow in blue, I'm going to add just a little bit of black. We have to make the shadows a little bit darker because they are closer. So I'm going to add a little bit of a grayish black color to these shadows just to make them a little bit more dominant in the painting. And obviously the shadow is going to be darker closest to the rock and fade out as it gets further away from the rock. So you can add that darker gray color right below the rock and then let it fade out to that blue. So go ahead and just continue to add your shadows to your rocks. Like I said before, if you need to rewind the video or pause the video at any time, go for it. I will just let you guys go ahead and finish creating your shadows. And then the last thing I do at the very end is I go back with just a little bit of straight black paint on my brush. Just black. No blue, no gray, no brown, just black. And I want to create that nice dark shadow right at the base of each rock just to add that depth, just to add a little bit more shadow right at the base so that we don't lose any of that in the final painting. I just love how this turns out. It looks so dramatic. And that's it, you guys. We've completed it. I'm so excited to see what you guys come up with. Have so much fun painting this. You can do it more than once, obviously. This may take you 1 week, 2 weeks. Take your time on it. Revisit it. You don't have to do this all in one sitting. This is a little bit more complicated than the last project that we did. So make sure you're being patient with yourself. Ask questions if you have questions. Share it in the group. I'm just really excited to see what you guys come up with, but I just love this painting so much. It's such a relaxing painting and beautiful. So you guys can hang these up when you're done. Rip them out of your sketchbook and frame them because they are just so beautiful. And I hope you guys have fun painting it. Great job, and I cannot wait to see you in the next video. Bye, guys.